This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
Tom Cruise does all his own stunts. Somebody asked him, aren't you scared when you do these stunts? And Tom said, it's not that I don't get scared when I'm doing these things. It's that I don't mind being scared. He's trained himself to take on fear.
Wow, I can't believe we're back here at Courage Week. And I also can't believe we're tiptoeing towards our 250th episode. We still have a few months to go, but of all of the episodes, every once in a while, you find people and you realize they're on their journey and you're on your journey. And I'll say, I don't think I've actually run into a commender of courage like I have as my guest is today. And joining me today, Ranjay Gulati, head of business administration at Harvard, author of How to Be Bold, and you're looking at the science of everyday courage and how leaders can tame fear to play to win. And Ranjay, when I think you know this, like when I first saw your stuff, fear took over my veins at first. To be true, like fear, I was like, wait a minute, what is this? And then the more I read your material, the more I was appreciative of the research you've done, of the work you're doing. Also, I think we're so aligned on the need for purpose. Yeah, welcome to the show, man. Great to see you.
Thank you, Ryan. It's a pleasure to always encounter kindred spirit. When you discovered me and I then said, who is this person? And the more I said, oh my God, sometimes people think alike, you're on the same page. And I think that it's really important to understand how courage or bravery or boldness is such a big currency today, right? If you want to be anything in life, you want to do anything in life, courage is an unlock. But the word courage, everyone thinks they know what it is, but I think there's so much confusion around the very word itself. So I think for starters, you have to clarify what exactly is courage. And then from there, you work your way into okay, then the question is, can you learn to be courageous?
Which I think we both agree that is a muscle. It's like going to the mental gym. You can actually learn how to be brave.
That was my central thesis and discovery, was people I encountered who were courageous were not born courageous. They became courageous. They learned to be courageous. That was my biggest learning. The second learning was they were not fearless. Courage was taking action in the face of fear. They were afraid, but they still chose to act. In fact, some of the earliest research on the subject was about British bomb disposal squads during World War II. And the discovery was they were scared, but they found a way to still do their jobs. And as they trained harder and worked longer, their fear went down. They dampened their fears. So how do you learn to face your fear and take action in spite of fear? Because fear is the primal, primitive human emotion. It's hardwired in the amygdala, the primitive reptilian brain. So it was a survival impulse. So you're taking on something that is kind of evolutionarily hardwired in us.
Ranjay, I'm instantly regretting that we only blocked an hour, but we will do what we can. First and foremost, we always say that we're corporate fear fighters. What is the largest fear that you as an organization are facing? Like, let's not, and I am so with you. I'm not in the business of being fearless. I actually want you to fear more, right? It's just giving that fear gratitude and like not being afraid of that fear. And so what's amazing for you, what I love, one of the things I researched on you is you have this fear equation. I have a courage equation. Can you share what your fear equation is, please?
To understand fear as an emotion, you have to understand the point of origin of fear. The point of origin of fear is uncertainty. Now, what is uncertainty? Uncertainty is not the same as risk. Risk is where you kind of know the distribution of outcomes, okay? 10% chance of this, 30% chance of that, right? So when you're applying to college, your kids are applying to college, they're trying to decide, where do I apply early? and the counselor will basically say, show me your GPA and your SAT scores and your extracurriculars. Okay, here are your reach schools, here are your likely schools, here are your, safety schools, right? And so you map it out. That's risk management. Uncertainty is where you don't know the distributional outcomes. Sometimes in very rare disease diagnoses, which happens tragically, people don't know. Or the early days of COVID, we didn't know. Or the great financial crisis when we thought the whole world was going to come upside down. We don't know. And so uncertainty is the point of origin of fear. And the idea is we need to understand that uncertainty activates loss of control. And then we are naturally feel fear. So in a situation that is uncertain, now the question you can ask me, Ryan, is there more uncertainty today or less uncertainty today in our lives? Technological uncertainty, climate uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty, political uncertainty. There is like so many, and CEOs today, in a recent article, they analyze CEO analyst earnings calls, and they're using the word uncertainty 3 times more than they did the previous quarter. So you have something happening in the world around us that makes it more uncertain, which naturally triggers fear. And that's the fear equation. And now the question is, what do you do with that fear? Either we let it overwhelm us. The fear response usually is not fight or flight. Fight is the last response. It's freeze or flight. So we give in to our fears, or we learn to face our fears. And that residual capacity to face our fears and do something.
Ranjay, you'll be happy to know that very statistic, which I got from your recent article. I think you said 76% of companies cited uncertainty on their last earnings call, up from like 36% or something like that. So I was down in Florida. I gave a keynote to C-suites of the entire restaurant industry, and started with that. And then kind of worked our way towards, hey, even 70% of the time when you need to make a change, corporate initiatives fail. And then I love this other quote I learned from you that you had said, and you said, large incumbent companies in general are sluggish, slow, unable to innovate, unable to keep up with the market shift, inertial organizations. You have to crank up the metabolism of the organization or you're going to get left behind. To me, that sounds like courage. That sounds like action. As a leader, what is your advice for someone who's listening who might sort of have a little bit of that? Well, they have a lot of uncertainty and maybe too much ambiguity.
What is interesting is about 2/3 of the book is about individual courage. Like, how do you deal with the fear equation? What happens to us individually? We experience uncertainty and all that. And the last third of the book is about what I call collective courage. That this notion of courage or boldness is something that is as relevant, I think, for organizations as it is for individuals. But I needed to start with first principles to get into it. And if you look at collective courage, the same idea applies in that organizations, as they get bigger, they start to create structure and process to create accountability, predictability, reliability. In that desire to have predictability and reliability, you build risk aversion into the system. You collectively become risk averse. To use a sports metaphor, you start to play not to lose instead of playing to win. Also, people have called it the success trap. The more successful you've been, the more risk averse you become. And so then the question is, in this caution, how do you take it on? And that, I think, is the key question to be asking yourself. And I think that's very important to consider.
I'd love to humanize you. Give me a little color on, one, are you courageous? Do you see yourself as courageous? As you had this hypothesis of this new, looking at the concept of courage in companies and the need for it. Do you see yourself as courageous?
So let me back up a little bit on that one. And this is in the intro chapter in my book. As a kid, my father was in the military, and he was in a bloody war, and he was a military intelligence officer, and he was behind enemy lines on a dangerous mission. Anyway, he came back, 10 years old, I'm kind of proud of my dad. He's on a special ops mission and all this stuff. And I'm watching James Bond movies back then. And so I remember having this conversation with my dad. I said, Dad, when you were out there, were you scared? And my dad was a very honest, transparent guy. He never held anything back from me. And he said, Son, when I was out there, it was scary. But, it was scary because we were behind enemy lines. We had no supply lines. We had no extraction plan to get out. And we had lost the element of surprise because the enemy found out about us. They were on our tail and they were extremely well trained themselves. He said, but I had a job to do. I was responsible for my team, for my country, for the mission. And so I did it. But yeah, it was scary. I remember 10-year-old me being thoroughly disappointed in my dad. All I could register was, I can't believe he was scared, because the movies show us that these heroes are not scared. And, it took me a long time to realize courage is the action in the face of fear. Now, let me fast forward a few years later. My mother is a very successful fashion designer, and she buys a property outside New Delhi where I was growing up, and for the farmhouse where she's going to do her design work. And shortly after buying it, a few months later, the whole land gets rezoned from agricultural to residential. So her piece of land, 5 acres, is massively valuable. The developer is chasing her to buy it from her. She doesn't want to sell. She wants to have her farm. Now there's going to be a big road getting there, so she can get there very quickly. And she doesn't really want the money. But one day, some guy shows up and, he's adamant to see her and says, this is my last meeting. I promise never to harass you. And so the guard outside asked me, he wants to meet your mom. I go inside, tell my mom, he's promising last time ever. So she says, send him in. He comes in, he has a blank check, and he has a piece of paper. Says, ma'am, please sign it. My boss will not let me come back home today without your signing it. He says, look, I don't want to sell. He says, you write the blank check, you write the amount. He says, no. Then he gets adamant. She says, no. Then he says, ma'am, my boss will not let me come back without your signature. And then he's wearing a blazer like me. He pulls it back and he has a gun tucked inside his waistband. So I'm frozen. Okay. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? My mom, without hesitation, stands up, walks up to him, and slaps him. He didn't see it coming. She says, you're going to walk into my house and try to scare me? Get out of here. The guy ran out of there so fast he forgot his checkbook. And they never came back. So, I think I asked after, I said, crazy, weren't you scared? Didn't you see the gun? She says, yeah, I was scared. But just because I'm scared doesn't mean I won't do something. And I realized courage is a choice. And I can speak more about that because that was my first. Now, I myself, I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. Honestly, I was ashamed. I stood there frozen thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I don't know. Now, have I done things that I would consider courageous? Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call myself, I'm not a special ops commando like my father was. I nor am I an entrepreneur like my mother was. But yeah, and I think of courage as not just physical courage. We think of courage as only physical courage. Courage is also moral courage. So standing up for what you believe in, But I did try to put myself through fear. My own experimentation with fear came through athletics. So I learned to fly an airplane. I was scared doing it. It was scary. But I said, I'm going to do it. 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 I did it. I have a license. I don't fly that much anymore, but I have a license. I learned to windsurf. I'm not particularly comfortable in water, but I said, I'm going to learn how to windsurf. So I put myself through that. So I took myself in places where I had to deal with fear, physical fear. And it's interesting not to compare myself to Tom Cruise, but I don't know if you know, Tom Cruise does all his own stunts.
Please do.
Yeah, why not? So Tom Cruise does all his own stunts.
Yes.
And, after somebody asked him, Tom, aren't you scared when you do these stunts? And Tom said, it's not that I don't get scared when I'm doing these things. It's that I don't mind being scared. He's trained himself to take on fear. So how do you do that? I think is what courage is a choice. and courage can be learned. That's what I have come to realize in this project.
Well, I so appreciate even the choices you made on. First of all, it's a little bit of memory lane. I think we get to see what life is like for you and what Ranjay was like as a kid and as you grew up. And then I would say my first two interviews for my book was with my mom and my dad, but separate. I did them separate. And my dad is an entrepreneur. He's a lawyer. His one rule is he's 83, still works. And when lawyers now work for him, they're like, what are the rules of the practice? And he always says, I only have two rules. Come say hi to me when you get in and come say goodbye to me when you leave. And I think, there's a lot in the subtext, and that's the choice that he makes, but he loves what he does. But my dad also had to do a ton of odd jobs to make his way. My dad was courageous in his own way. My mother, I grew up in the DMV, so DC area. My mother was from Ohio. I would not have pinned her as the definition of courage. However, she never left the state. She went to Ohio State. She was engaged to someone 2 years older. That person had moved to Maryland. And when she graduated, she had the courage to follow him. And it wasn't for too long. They were engaged, and she broke off the engagement. And at that time, that is courage. In that moment, she knew in her heart, you talk about your mom, she knew in her heart that this person wasn't for her. And by the way, thank goodness, because only half of me would be here, maybe legs, right? So I'm glad she did it. And so one of the things I learned is that courage is very much like skiing. There's bunny slope courage, there's double black diamond courage. Not everybody's doing their own stunts. Not everybody's willing to jump and learn how to fly an airplane. But my favorite word actually is not courageous, it's willing. It's like, are you actually open-minded and willing to hear someone else's point of view? Or then as a team, once we agree, are we going to will it through? I love the double entendre of the meeting. That's kind of what I learned from my parents. And I think you nailed it that, I used to have a slide that said unlocking courage is the competitive advantage. And very recently, Ranjay, I changed it to no, it's choosing courage is the competitive advantage. We are so aligned on that. One of the other things I've seen just from enough conversations, and I'm sure you're in the same space, that people do confuse reckless with courage, and they confuse resilience with courage. I'm curious what your thoughts are on those other words.
So look, Aristotle made that distinction between recklessness and courageous. So it's a very old distinction. And I think courage is bold action, but doesn't mean reckless action. People who are courageous are very thoughtful about it. My father didn't go on a special op mission without proper preparation. Tom Cruise doesn't jump out of off cliffs in a motorcycle without preparation and a parachute. I mean, he's got a parachute with him, and a backup parachute, I'm sure. And they do endless preparation and simulations and trials before they have Tom do the stunt. So all these are people who are courageous are not reckless people. They are methodical, thoughtful, but they don't let the situation overwhelm them. They're only able to do that by virtue of having tamed or dampened or dealt with their fear. Because uncertainty around them, and I think if you look around us today, it's really easy for all of us to freak out and say, what is happening around me? I mean, there's so much change going on, so many uncertainties, so many variables of uncertainty. Where are we going to be in next year? Where will we be? Where will AI go next year? Where will climate go next year? Where will geopolitics go next year? Where will everything go next year, right? Where will everything be?
I'm curious, when you brought this topic up, and I don't know the sauce making business of Harvard, so forgive me. Let us behind the curtain a little bit. And I should also share one of the little smiles I had about a decade ago. I came to Harvard for executive education, and you know the deal. You're there for a week. Walking on that campus, though, you feel it. It feels different. You're there to marinate in it all, and it did. It changed my life. I was truly there, sharing some of the methodology I had. And I'm I remember when is office hours with the teachers? I need to meet with somebody please call me off this cliff. If this is not useful, because I'm looking on how to operationalize courage, please tell me, am I full of it? Does this land with you? And I had shared my methodology there with a couple of the teachers. And I just had I remember Michael Norton at the time was one of my teachers. He just sat back in his chair and smiled. He's like, keep going, man. You're onto something. So that gave me a ton of confidence to continue down the path, looking at this need for corporate courage. But when you bring the topic to your peers at first, is it head nods? Is it eye rolls? Is it curiosity? What does that process look like?
So the book isn't out yet, so it's too early for me to tell you.
Okay, fair enough.
But I will say one thing is, the beauty and joy of academia is you have academic freedom to research whatever topics interest you. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you look at a place like Harvard Business School, our mission is we educate leaders who make a difference in the world. And so we're really all about studying important problems of the times and to study them rigorously. My effort here was to study what I hope and believe in my heart is an important problem of our times. And I believe and hope I've done it rigorously and methodically to help illuminate everybody and have a better understanding of it. And there's no political slant in it. There is no other agenda in it. It's just to help people become more courageous. So if the book helps a few people find their inner courage, I feel mission accomplished. So, I just wrote there's an adaptation of the book in the Harvard Business Review, this issue. It's the cover story. I have it right here. Let me pull it out of here.
I mean, this is how we found each other. Do you know how many people texted me this story?
Oh, really?
It was great. Well, the good news is I'm on the West, right? So it has spread like wildfire. And again, I'm grateful that I was introduced to your work. And here's another thing that I loved. This is my language, not yours, but we're aligned on purpose too, on the power of purpose. I'm calling it Maslow's hierarchy of work, because you had these three phases, right? Where the first phase was satisfaction, and then I believe in engagement, and then third was inspired work. Walk me through a little bit of how you landed here, and if I'm listening and I'm running a team, how do I unlock that third level?
So, when we think about work, there is a cynical way of thinking about this. For the longest time, economists and organizational theorists were trying to design work systems to get people to work harder. Okay? Come on. It's because the general assumption in economics in particular is that human beings are maximizers, meaning they'll work the least to make the most. You're economizers or optimizers or whatever you want to call it, right? So the goal is to align the incentive structure to get people to work harder. So for the longest time, the idea was, or productivity, you don't want to call it work harder, you must say make them more productive. Okay? That's another euphemism. You can talk about it that way. So for the longest time, it was all about kind of what was called job satisfaction. And you were trying to look for ways to create job satisfaction, meaning pay people well, reward them for performance, so pay for performance, create a safe work environment, give them good training, provide them the resources and support they need. Bang. You got satisfied workers who perform better than unsatisfied workers. And that model is still relevant. Then in the 80s, there was a Harvard Business School professor named Richard Hackman who said, all that is true. But in addition to all that, people want to find ways to feel engaged. And the way you engage people is by empowering them and giving them more responsibility, allowing them to have an impact, allowing them to feel ownership of our end-to-end project. So he said you got to design the jobs, it was called job design theory, to make people feel more engaged and empowered. And if you have engaged work, and then Gallup ran with this idea of employee engagement, because the idea was engaged workers are even more productive than satisfied workers. Then in the last decade, two professors, one at Michigan, one at Yale, came up with something else. They said, oh, that's wonderful, but there's another level you can take this. People can be inspired at work. And when they're inspired, they're even more productive because it's like they got meaning coming out of this. Now, as you think about this arc, it's not easy. And you ask yourself, people coming to work, why do we come to work? And that's why that framework that you mentioned was in my last book on deep purpose, because I was trying to show that when we think about our organization, it's important to see that having a purpose motivates us in a different way. So now, how does it link to courage? What I found is that when organizations have a conviction from a place of purpose, not only does it make people feel more inspired, but they're willing to take bold steps because that conviction, along with commitment, that feeling of responsibility, we gotta do it, and ownership unlocks bold behavior. And switching back to your earlier comment about risk-averse organizations, it goes from a defensive playing not to lose to a winning mindset.
To us, the amount of times we've said this is about winning. And if there's a spectrum of businesses, they're on somewhere from a coward brand to a stasis brand to an iterative brand to an aspirational brand to a courage brand. And again, courage brands win. They are the ones that are having conviction for the work. By the way, easy to talk about, but when you're in the fire and the board is telling you one thing and the numbers are saying something else and the data is saying something else, you can see how fog wins out and paralysis wins out. But if you could actually install courage inside an organization and be consistent about it, we're on a way.
It's not easy, right? I mean, you think about companies that have done it. You look at Netflix and say, how did they go from DVD distribution to streaming, from streaming to content production, to then taking on Disney, Amazon, Apple, and everybody and facing them down, right? How did they do that? Or you look at Amazon, how did they go from a book selling company, selling books, to the retail juggernaut they are today? And not as retail juggernaut, but they've got Amazon Web Services, which sells infrastructure services. How do these, or NVIDIA, or any of these companies, you ask the question, what is it about this organization and the people who work there or who lead it that allows them to be so impactful?
So if someone's still listening to our conversation, they're clearly invested in this convo, right? We're still in their ears, we're in their car, on their jogs. What do you want to make sure they walk away with? And again, let's assume that they are a leader. Whether they lead the company or lead the team or they lead a family, what's like your hope that they walk away from this conversation?
In a world of uncertainty, which we live in today, it's okay to feel scared. Second, once we know that uncertainty activates fear, the whole object is how do you deal with it? And to remind ourselves that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is taking action in the face of fear, in spite of fear. Third, courage is not an innate personality trait. It can be learned behavior. A few occasional people are congenitally fearless or have some kind of a DNA structure. Most of us are mere mortals. We teach ourselves and resource ourselves to deal with fear and operate with courage in the face of fear. So I would want to say courage is accessible to all. It's a choice we make. You heard that about Tom Cruise or my mother. I'm okay being afraid.
In fact, if you're not afraid, it's probably not courage. You have your fear equation. We have our courage equation. I don't know if you've stumbled into this. So we have 3 levers of courage where it's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage. And you're never going to have 100% of the knowledge you need to make a call, which is why we need faith. And when we talk about faith, that is the conviction component. It's the belief component. And how often have you known something and felt something and then we never leap? There's no action. So if you remove one of the three levers, knowledge and faith without action is paralysis, and faith and action without knowledge is a reckless move. And a knowledge and action without faith, if you're in a business and you're numb on the inside and you're going through the motions, you're working on safe, you're working on status quo. You need each of those for it to be, oh, that's how you know if you're actually working on something courageous. So, one, I'm curious as you think about this definition, does it hold? What's the most interesting part of it? And what's the least interesting part of it to you?
So look, I think I found your framework quite intriguing, and I think it's you put a lot of thought into it, and it seems very cogent to me. So I came at it slightly differently, but I think in a complementary way. I don't think in any way mine is better than yours, and nothing like that. I think they're complementary ways of looking at the same problem. I think what we're both saying in our own distinct ways is, in the face of fear, what are the things that can enable you to still choose to act in spite of that? That courage is action in the face of fear, so it's unnatural, it's not normal, yet a few people out there still choose to do so. What is it that is going on in their heads that maybe we can replicate in our own heads so that we too can be courageous? And is there good social science research to back it up? So in my case, I collected, almost 200 stories of actors in small organizations, large organizations, off the streets, ordinary people, famous people. And I was trying to look at patterns of behavior in their story. But I then also looked at social science research to help sharpen my understanding of that story and also to build generalizable theory on what are some general principles we can learn. So just like your three, I have my 9 C's. 6 of them are about individual courage, and then 3 of them are about organizational courage. And I walk through each one of them to delineate what it is, how does it resource people, and how do they choose to act in spite of the fear that they're facing.
If you had more time, because this is like, not even, I'm not talking about the podcast. I'm talking about, we always wish we had more time. And at some point you got to put the pen down on the book, right? I know the one topic that I was dying to keep going, and maybe it's an act two, but I'm going to hold my thought because I don't want to stay in your thought. Was there one spot that you're like, oh no, this is a big rabbit hole. This is a different book or it's ancillary. Was there some other component that you discovered that you wanted to go deeper or you'd like to go deeper that you just knew you had to bookend the book and get it out in the world?
Great question. Yeah, there was. And it's really kind of ironic because when I got the foreword to my book, which was also a surprise, the gentleman who wrote the foreword actually talked about exactly the topic that I was hoping to cover in a chapter that I never wrote. And I'll tell you what the thesis was. The thesis was that ultimately courage is about confronting our own self, the courage to look within, the courage to transform ourselves. We think of courage as taking action in the world. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. I'm going to impact this. I'm going to do that. Sometimes the hardest thing to change is ourselves. And how do we have, and most of us, I'll include myself, it's a challenge. It's scary to look within. It's scary to try to really introspect about who am I? Why am I here? What do I want to achieve? What are my values? What do I want to believe in? What is my purpose? Those actually are scary questions. And so, ultimate courage, yes, it's about looking outside. Yes, it's about facing the world. But courage is as important about looking within and looking at ourselves with compassion, humanity, empathy, and then doing the same for the world around us.
I can't help but not run that exercise now as you're talking about it for myself. And I'm so proud of me, like in an odd way. And people don't admit this. Like the journey that I've been on. And also, maybe this seems odd, but I'm so grateful for you for the work that you're doing and continue to do. And I go back to the beginning, like I said, when I saw your work at first the dinosaur lizard brain in me is like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then I love that we're both on the same mission here. It's a shared mission. Leaders need to be more courageous. People need to be more courageous. I guess just to put a pin on my answer, and I'm curious if you did any work in this space or if it's worth another conversation when everybody frees up, whatever that means. I was really fascinated by looking at courage by country. Like, where is country accepted? Where is like legacy or respect or honor playing, and courage is a little bit less on the dials because, hey, in this country, we just what our parents do is what we do. We respect that past. I am very curious to study a little bit how courage might play in different parts of the world and different countries. Maybe if it's continents. I don't know if you've looked at that at all, or that's a curious topic to you.
That is a fascinating question. Fascinating question. And I don't know the answer to that. I absolutely do not know the answer to that. It's a great question is all I can say.
Yeah. Looks like we've got work to do. Let's get to where we got to get off this podcast.
But I will tell you that, you know what? I think you're right that courage may be a cultural construct that in some cultures, it's not something that is socially sanctioned, where you have a culture of conformity and obedience. Because if you look at it, there was a very famous sociologist who studied the logic of human behavior. And he lays out 4 logics. And he says one logic is rational, one logic is meaning-based, interpretive, one logic is tradition-based. So it's very tradition-based, right? And then there was a 4th one as well, I'm blanking on. So each logic, one was conviction-based. So, some cultures, I am sure, are so tradition-based that it's hard for them to create the space and condone what you might consider courageous behavior. It's interesting because society at one level celebrates courage in general. Let's look at our society. We celebrate courage, but sometimes courageous people are deviants. They're trying to break things and change them. And Steve Jobs talked about that actually very early on in his career, that, he was here to break stuff. We all want the omelet. We don't want to break the eggs to make the omelet. So, it's like, I love omelets, man, but, don't ask me to go break the eggs, man. That's painful work. I don't want to do that.
Too messy, Ranjay.
So courageous people move the world forward, but don't always, win popularity contests in those moments of time when they're doing that.
Ranjay, thank you so much. You've got a champion on the West Coast. Folks, pick up How to Be Bold. You can get it everywhere you'd expect you could get it. Any last thoughts, Ranjay? Any last challenges to the audience?
I think the world is in desperate need of courageous people. There are so many problems in this world. Humankind has moved forward, advanced for thousands of years not because of the majority of us. The majority of us, our ancestors, majority of them who survived were cowards. They ducked and hid, right? If any danger came there, they were not fighting, they were flighting or freezing. But there was the few who were willing to take bold action. And they have moved us to where we are today. We are at so many inflection points in our lives. I think the world needs courage. And for individuals, courage is a competitive advantage. I think, it can be your unlock. There's research on regret and by some Cornell professors, and Daniel Pink wrote a book about it as well. People regret inaction much more than action when they look back at their lives. So if we want to live fulfilled, meaningful, complete lives, I think we have to train ourselves to be bold, which is taking action in the face of uncertainty.
All right, folks, you've got work to do. Let's go take some action. Ranjay, I always say are courageous. Our focus is to inspire 3.4 million people to choose courage. which is 1% of the US population. You've got a front row seat to some serious change makers. Keep doing what you're doing. I really hope this isn't the end of our dialogue. Thanks for writing the book, and let's stay in touch.
Ryan, thank you so much. You asked me great questions, forced me to think, and that's all I can ask for. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm delighted that somebody's out there really pushing the frontier and thinking about being courageous, being brave. So thank you for your efforts.
Thanks, Ranjay. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.